Spoštovane, spoštovani, z mano Michael Voris, founder, ustanovitelj Church Militanta in voditelj Vortexa. Hi, Michael. It's an honor.
Hello, Aleš, how are you? No honor, no honor. Just we're all Catholics in the same battle, right? So there we go.
So my Slovene audience, and probably for some Croats and Serbs too, who is Michael Voris and what are Church Militant and Vortex?
Church Militant is the online location for St. Michael's Media. St. Michael's Media is an apostolate we founded in late 2005 into early 2006. So we've been around, 14, 15 years going on. And originally we were founded just to help people understand the Catholic faith and what they taught, because at least in the West, loads of bishops have been horrible teachers and been involved in all sorts of horrible crimes and all that sort of stuff. And people weren't being told the faith. We didn't know the part about the bishops being really horrible until we started getting into it. It's about 3 years or so into it, we started saying, well, something's really wrong in the church. Something's really wrong. This isn't just some of the people not believing. There's some deeper cause to all of this. And so we started exploring around, and one thing led to another, and we began discovering the whole homosexual bishops and priests thing, and the rape, sexual abuse of thousands of altar boys, that many of the bishops and the priests just simply don't believe the faith. It's not that they're just clumsy at it, they don't believe it. And of course that, because they're the leaders, that transmits down to the people, and the church is in a woeful state. So we founded this to kind of help do what we can here to help restore the faith and help people understand that this earthly life is not all there is. As a matter of fact, compared to eternity, it's essentially nothing. But there's so much emphasis today in the church from Pope Francis and the bishops, and there's climate change, immigration, and hey guys, they're not unlegitimate or illegitimate issues, but they're not the most important things. Popes and bishops are not supposed to be spending all their time talking about earth. They're supposed to be spending all their time talking about heaven. There's loads of people on earth who can talk about earth. Your job is to remind people that they're supposed to work on their salvation and get to heaven and not be damned. And they don't talk about that. So we do.
Before we get all into homosexuality in church, amongst clergy, amongst American clergy, amongst global clergy, I asked you before we started filming if we started a bit late, a half hour late, because you had some really actual news to report about Vatican and China. What is it all about, Michael?
There are some reports coming out now from some pretty good experts who keep track of world financial markets and international relations, the inside operation of how the communists in China operate, what their goals are. Because look, people have to remember, communism, Marxism, something I'm sure many of your viewers are sadly familiar with, is a system, a philosophy built on world domination. And one of probably the biggest enemy of Marxism is the Catholic Church. So whenever Marxism has an opportunity to wipe out religion in general, and the Catholic Church specifically, it attempts to do that every time. One of the things that has an awful lot of Catholics around the world very troubled is the emphasis on what are essentially Marxist goals, or goals that Marxists use to advance their cause, and the support they get from Pope Francis. And Pope Francis and many of the cardinals in the Vatican and that he's appointed, or he's raised up to a certain level, high positions. And when it became publicly known that the Pope had taken one of the most egregious, evil homosexual predators, Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, and restored him to a very active role and then dispatched him to China. This man, for many of your viewers who may not know, was the highest ranking senior American cardinal for years in the church. He was one of the major players here, wildly influential on the world scene, not just in America, but everywhere. And he was also sexually molesting dozens and dozens of seminarians of his. He had arranged parties, gay orgies that teenage victims of his were taken to and were raped multiple times by gay men while he watched and was there. So this is a wicked, horrible, evil man. And Pope Francis, after he had retired, after McCarrick had retired, Pope Francis took him and elevated him to a position where he would start negotiating with the communists in Beijing. And now that those negotiations produced an accord, an agreement between China and the Vatican in 2018, where on the surface it looks like the point was to just have better, more friendly relations between Beijing and Rome. The reality was, however, that China was using and is using the Vatican to influence Italian politics, to be more friendly to accepting, you sort of get a foothold in the EU, the European Union, and influence all sorts of, inject themselves into the various nations' economies and bringing in more Chinese citizens. That's why northern Italy had such a massive outbreak of the COVID virus early on, because there was a very large Chinese patriot population in northern Italy, working in the textile industries and a number of other industries like that. So what the Chinese wanted to do, again, is to get, you can't, even though the Vatican may not be well liked among the Italians as far as religion or theology, it's still very instrumental in how the Italian parliament and Italian politicians respond. And the Vatican has an awful lot to say about Italian politics. So in order to get to Italy, China went through Rome. And it now appears, based on the testimony of at least two people who would know, that the Vatican, Pope Francis, have been being paid $2 billion dollars every year since 2013 by the communists in China to essentially buy the church's influence to help spread all of this, these Marxist goals all over the world. That is an enormous sum of money. So right now it would stand at roughly $12 billion. The Francis Pontificate or Francis Vatican has received from communists. It's almost too startling to try to get your mind around, but it sure seems to be the case. So we're doing a big report on that. We're just kind of in the process of doing it right now. If we weren't being interviewed right now, I'd be working on that report.
Thank you for that. So what's the issue with current Pope? I remember some people told me that he was a fervent critiquer of this liberation theology in Southern America, which is, to simplify it, a Catholic Marxism of a kind, but they always told about current Pope that although he was a fervent critiquer of liberation theology, it somehow stood with him. Why does he seem to be so sympathetic towards communism, or at least progressivism, or at least this leftist ideologies?
Well, I think part of it is from, when you listen to some of the things he says theologically, and I don't mean in formal statements, I mean just when he's talking on the plane to reporters or, just things like that. Some of the stuff he says is just, it just doesn't ring like he has a very good Catholic education. I mean, it's kind of funny. There used to be an expression here, I don't know if it's everywhere else in the world, but in America, the expression was, when you were going to answer an obvious question, you say, well, is the Pope Catholic? And today, that expression doesn't work anymore, because you have to go, I'm not exactly sure if he's Catholic or not. The way he responds to some questions, and again, he's kind of, now, he didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, it wasn't like everything is good and then Francis fell in and everything got bad. There's a serious problem in the church that has been here now for decades. And it all goes back ultimately to a lack of supernatural faith, one of the theological virtues on the part of many bishops. It's from that pool that Francis came out. He emerged from that pool. He happens to now have been elected Pope, but before he was Pope, he was a cardinal. He's still a bishop. Still a bishop now, a bishop of Rome. He just happens to be the bishop of Rome as opposed to the bishop of somewhere else. So, when we talk about the intellectual and faith corruption that many bishops all over the world, but especially in the West, have gone through, well, why would he have necessarily been exempted from that? So it just seems like he's received very poor formation and he's a Jesuit, which, normally, historically anyway, Jesuits have the best formation. I don't think that's been the case for, since the 1950s, maybe 60s. So I think he was formed in a very wrong-headed notion of what Catholicism is. And, he was somewhat opposed to liberation theology when he was in Argentina, but just somewhat opposed. He didn't try to get rid of it and say this is wrong, evil and stuff. I think he thought some of the things that he proposed were maybe going a step too far. But he is certainly warm to many of the proposals of liberation theology. But you have to understand, again, just like China and this deal here with the China Accord, liberation theology came from the KGB. The KGB, while they were obviously the state police of Russia, Soviet Union, they're the ones who introduced into South America liberation theology. We have that from some defectors who were rather highly placed in the Soviet apparatchik, and they said, yeah, this was one of the things they did to destabilize the Catholic Church in South America. They introduced liberation theology, and they made it sound like it was kind of the gospel. Made it sound like it was the gospel, while also bringing about political change for the poor. And they kind of married those two things together. Well, those two things can't marry together because Marxism itself is based on the foundational principle that there is no God and the state is what's supreme. Well, okay, that disqualifies it from any sort of acceptance by Catholics. But if you say things the right way and people don't really understand, and you're lying and being deceitful and taking advantage of people's ignorance, you can push things pretty far. And liberation theology has done all of that. And so I don't think that I don't think Pope Francis would agree with every single tenet of liberation theology, but he accepts way too many of them. And there's many people around him, high-ranking people around him, Cardinal Maradiaga, Cardinal Perron, all these guys who do accept everything about liberation theology and its communist roots, which is why they're more than happy to do business with communist China. Communist China, has murdered hundreds of millions of its own citizens, both born and unborn. It has what is essentially a concentration camp system with millions of its own citizens in those camps because of either religious reasons or political ideology differences or something like that. It is a communist nation bent on world domination that has enlisted the help of the Vatican to push atheistic, godless communism, Marxism throughout the world. That's a pretty horrible thing to have to try to begin to accept, but that's what they are.
We have this somewhat funny history in Slovenia. Catholic Church, local Catholic Church, has been demonized by communist propaganda as a being favorable toward National Socialism during World War II, and during the communist regime, Catholic Church has been submissive towards Communist Party, of course, and many Slovene Catholics nowadays seem to have some sort of Stockholm syndrome towards communism and leftism and socialism and so on, and many of them don't quite understand why Catholic Church cannot be sympathetic towards communism and socialism and Marxism.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that the communists are so good at, and I don't make a distinction between communists and Marxists because there's not one really worth making. It's just it's one applies to the philosophy, the other applies to the political ideology. So they're the same thing. Marxists, communists are the same thing. One of the things the Marxists are really, really good at is disinformation. They will find some theme that they want everybody to accept, or a large number of people to accept, and they'll keep drumming it into people's heads. They'll just keep drumming it in. So one of the things they do is they immediately get control of the media. Whatever the media is, whether it's newspapers, radio stations, TV, whatever it is, they'll get control of the media. And they'll repeat it. And we see that this is what's been done with China. They have various Twitter accounts, thousands and thousands. The Communist Party in China has thousands of hidden little Twitter accounts where they constantly spread their disinformation, misinformation all over the place. And one of those themes, remember, what's the goal? You have to, as long as you know what the big picture is, everything else underneath it will fall into place. The big goal is world domination, and in order to do that, the West and the Catholic Church, which formed the West, need to be, wiped off the scene. So how do you do that? Okay, now you have 1,000 different little battles, 1 million different little battles and strategies, all going on at the same time. Some of them are attack. Others are, promote how good, China or communism or something is. But it's all lies from beginning to end. One of the lies that they have tried to capitalize on extensively in Eastern Europe is that the largely Catholic leaders of Eastern Europe were friendly with the Nazis. There are probably some individual cases of that, certainly, but they try to make it sound as though Catholic leaders, bishops, cardinals, and all of that were very friendly with the Nazis. That's how the reputation, for example, of Pope Pius XII was completely ruined for half a century. It was a communist book that painted him as friendly to the Nazis. Another book was written called Hitler's Pope. And the whole thing was a pack of lies from beginning to end. But this is what both of those efforts, there was a play and there was that book, Hitler's Pope, both written by communists and then put out there. See, that's a media. Books are a type of media. You put things out there, and then your other media people do a story on it, and they repeat the story, and they take advantage of people's ignorance. Most people aren't well educated. Most people aren't very deep critical thinkers. Most people, don't read anywhere near to the degree that they should. They don't have an appreciation for history. They are sitting ducks, to use the expression here in the United States. They're sitting ducks, ready to be simply devoured at the first moment. You can tell them anything, and if you tell them enough times, they begin to believe it. And that's one of the lies of the communists, that the Catholic Church and Eastern European leaders who were Catholic, not clergy, were in league with or going along with the Nazis. Why do they say that? So that they can make you think how bad the Catholic leaders and the Catholic governments and Catholic priests and the church and everything else were, and they're, the church is evil today, just like it was back then. And, you have to get rid of them, and they're racist slaveholders, and they cooperate with Nazis, and they hate Jews. They just keep saying this stuff over and over and over and over. And the more they say it, the more people come to believe that it's true. And so it's all part of a great big misinformation campaign, which is why folks like you, folks like us, everybody else, there's got to be voices out there saying what the truth is. None of us have anywhere near the reach, numbers of people listening as the Marxist media outlets do. But you got to say the truth. You got to say the truth. You have got to say the truth.
I heard from some media or from some people, I don't know their background, they are ideological, their political background, about you, that you had some anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim stances before or in the past. Is it true, or anything true?
Well, I guess I'd have to say, I'm not anti-Muslim, like in the sense that, I think Muslims should be killed or put in concentration camps. The Chinese Communist Party thinks that, and they do it. Am I opposed to Islam as a religion? Yes, I'm opposed to Islam as a religion. It's a false religion. Am I opposed to any religion? I'm not. It's not because I'm not opposed to it because most of the people who supported it from the Middle East. I'm opposed to it because it's wrong. It just so happens that most of the people who support it are from the Middle East. I don't care what somebody's skin color is. I don't care what somebody's shoe size is, or whether they're male or female. I don't care. I care. None of those things can a person make a choice about. Whatever color you're born, whatever nationality or ethnicity you have, all of those things are completely irrelevant. But the choices you make and what you choose to believe, and then what you try to convince others to believe, that's where we're going to have differences. If it's somebody, and that includes in the church, in the Catholic Church as well, I would be more opposed to a Catholic bishop teaching something false about Jesus than I would ever begin to be about a Muslim who happens to be just, practicing Islam and going about his life. The bishop is more wrong. They're both wrong, but the bishop is more wrong, and he deserves to be called out and have that pointed out to him. So, nope, I don't hate Jews because they're Jews. Judaism is a man-made religion now. It wasn't at the time of Jesus, but after the temple was destroyed in the year 70, what emerged from the wreckage of sort of biblical Israel, if you want to call it that, was rabbinical Judaism. Well, rabbinical Judaism is not the Judaism that was around when Jesus was around. When Jesus was around and before that, there was a temple, there was sacrifice, there were priests, there was a kingdom, there was a land, their country, their nation. None of that exists anymore. It's gone away. It hasn't been around for 2,000 years. So I'm not opposed to somebody who's Jewish, but and I'm not opposed that things should be eliminated in the Jewish religion. Held at gunpoint, people should be forced to convert. I don't think anything like that. But these things that are wrong have to be challenged. And Judaism is a man-made religion now. It's rabbinical Judaism. Islam was invented by murdering, child raping prophet who wasn't a prophet. He'd been passed around from one family member to another as a child. His mom died when he was young. His father died when he was young. He went to a grandfather. He died. He went to an uncle. He died. And that was all before he was 15. So I can understand that Muhammad had been, struggled through his life, his early part of his life, to kind of, he didn't have stability in the household and all that. I get that. That's the case for lots of people. Lots of people don't turn out to be, murdering, marauding, child raping, leaders of religion, making stuff up, and then killing hundreds of millions of people if they refuse to believe it. So did he have a rough life? Yeah. Does that give him permission to wipe out, country after country? Of course not. So I oppose that system of beliefs. But the people in it, I don't want bad stuff to happen to them or think that they should be executed or something. I'd like to see them convert, but in order to convert, you have to be able to have a free discussion and explain, well, here's what you believe, here's what I believe, you're wrong. So, but I don't think people should be killed. I mean, it's just stupid. I've never said anything like that. My Catholic faith doesn't allow me to think like that, nor do I think like that just as a human being. I could be an atheist. I wouldn't think we just go kill people that disagree with them. And that'd be quite the scene if everybody just kept killing everybody every time they disagreed with them. That would not be a good thing. There wouldn't be much of the human race left, actually.
You guys have been very vocal, at least for last couple of years, about homosexuality and pedophilia amongst clergy. In Slovenia, we also had quite plenty of cases of priests and clergy being accused of pedophilia and so forth and so forth. But up till I started following you, me and many of my friends thought of it as a lot of it as a communist propaganda.
Oh no!
And this is where the serious part of the most serious part of our conversation begins. Your experience is somewhat different. This is truly happening to the church, and this is a real problem. Church of the church.
Absolutely, this has been. It's one of the things that was done by the communists to help destroy the church. The attacks weren't just from outside, many of those, but they also quietly invaded the church and brought in communist agents into seminaries for decades and decades. This is one of the things Joseph Stalin did starting in the 20s. And brought communist agents into the church, into the seminaries. Young communist agents who were also homosexual. Not all of them, but a good number of them. And the idea was just to get enough men, and it was thousands, into the seminaries all over the West, in America and Europe, and to slowly, like termites, slowly eat away at the teachings of the church, to put a doubt into people's minds, into, you know, 2 generations, 3 generations, each one building on the next one. And if you look around at certainly in the West, certainly United States and Western Europe, I mean, you look around and you say, well, it worked. You know, the amount of faith that people have, it has been completely wiped out. You know, America has about 20 to 25% of American Catholics actually go to Mass every Sunday. And in countries like France, Italy, German Catholics, Spain, I mean, France, Spain, and Italy are historically Catholic for 1,500 years. You know, not the percentage of Catholics who go to Mass is less than 5%. The percentage of Catholics who go to Mass in the Netherlands is less than 1%. The percentage of Catholics in Germany who go to Mass is less than 10%. The percentage of Catholics in Ireland who go to Mass. Ireland, you couldn't get more Catholic than Ireland. Ireland's more Catholic than Rome, at least it was. And the percentage of Catholics who go to Mass there every Sunday and Holy Day is below 5%. So these were once solidly Catholic nations, and not that long ago. We're not talking hundreds of years ago. We're talking, you know, in the 20th century, beginning of the 20th century. Here we are, just 100 years later, and you know, the last 50 in particular, and the faith has just been completely wiped out in these nations. You know, closing parishes by thousands all over the place, and it was accomplished. The process began with homosexual men going into seminaries, being put into seminaries who were actually communist agents, whose job was to simply go in and wherever they would get assigned, slowly eat away at the faith. Little here, little there, barely imperceptible, to just raise a doubt in somebody's mind about the teachings of the church. And you know, it only takes one match to start a forest fire, and that's what they did. And yeah, that was one of many communist initiatives to help destroy the faith.
I remember when British/Greek/Jewish/Catholic/homosexual journalist Milo Yiannopoulos, if you know him,
yes,
he tried to explain that his homosexuality might have been triggered by homosexual experience with a priest.
Yeah.
That's his hypothesis. He hypothesis that
yes.
he might have become a homosexual because of according to our standards, a pedophile had initiated a sexual intercourse with him or something like that, and people went mad. He got criticized and so forth. What's your stance on it? What's your stance on homosexuality? Is it a lifestyle? Is it partly genetic? What is it? What's your experience with sexuality and homosexuality and so forth?
I would say that I think everybody is. I would say that everybody is born, wired, engineered to be heterosexual. That's where the biology goes. That's where everything goes that way. Now, when somebody is younger, I'm speaking specifically to males. I can't really speak to lesbianism per se, but to male homosexuality. There are so many psychological issues or concerns surrounding a healthy sexuality. Psychiatrists and medical experts even refer to it as a psychosexual development. That if something or some things go wrong in the psychological development that touches on sexuality, that everybody has a sexuality, you can get it off course. Largely, many times, that is goes homosexual, but it could also, there's other things that, that could happen. People could develop, young people could develop young guys could develop bestiality, or there's a number of different things that can go wrong. But it seems often that one of the major things that goes wrong because of the psychological problem, the psychological issues that are going on. A father who doesn't seem, from the boy's perspective, doesn't seem to love him or care about him enough. So the boy, he doesn't feel a close bond with his dad to feel that he himself is growing into a man. He could have been a victim, like Milo was talking about in his example. He could have been a victim one or more times of being sexually assaulted, abused, raped as a young teenager, 11, 12, 13. And because of that, it's a physical thing that's happened to him biologically, but it also impacts the psychology, what he thinks. And you're dealing with a young person who, lots of older people don't have their, sex stuff straight in their head. It's even more difficult for somebody who's young. So if you have a sexual abuse victim, or you have somebody who is emotionally or psychologically, feels he was deprived of intimacy with his father. There's all sorts of things going on that could trigger the sexuality to get off course. And because you have to think of it this way, on the question of, well, they'll say you're born that way. Well, if you were born that way, that would mean that you were conceived that way. If you're saying you came out of the womb gay, well, that means while you were in the womb, you were gay. Why would nature program or have a mutation, if we're speaking just biological, because that's what the argument is, if you say you're born that way, well, why would nature program into its own its own pattern the ability to not reproduce? Nature doesn't do that. Nature is always about reproduction, advancing life, and advancing the race or the species, or whatever it is you happen to be looking at. So why would that happen? It also kind of denies the obvious reality that some people are just messed up in the head when it comes to sex. Now, that's not a biological thing. That's how did they get that way? So we know that some people can be exposed to very damaging psychological arenas or situations, and they become messed up sexually. Somebody who rapes women, a guy who rapes women. Is it a sexual act? Well, yeah, but it's not just a sexual act. As a matter of fact, it's something much more than just it's expressed in a sexual way. But there's a lot more going on there. The guy's sick in the head. There's something wrong up there. Well, how did he get like that? He uses sex to kind of go off course because of his own psychology. Well, why can't that happen with somebody who's gay? Or why can't that happen with somebody who, sees animals and becomes sexually aroused by them? There's things wrong psychologically that play out. They become internalized in the person. They come out of them in sexual ways. But the whole gay rights movement can't admit that, because the second they admit it, well, then it's like, oh, well, then is this, you raise the question of, well, can this change? Can the behavior change? Can the person change? Can you get back on course? And they will not allow that conversation to happen. They'll shut it down and call you every name under the sun, because they'll just say, no, sorry, can't happen. No, you're born that way. Shut up. You're a homophobe. You're a hater. And it just goes on and on. They won't allow an honest discussion on it. And that's very true in many quarters in the church as well. Many bishops will not allow that discussion to happen because they're gay themselves, and they've got boyfriends, and they were guilty of some of this child abuse and at least covering it up, or they've got friends in the seminary who they knew were gay, and now they're all bishops, 40 years later. And so, yeah, it's a very deceitful, wicked way of dealing with life, and they never face the truth about it. And it's a very, so it's a horrible thing, which if a person wants to run off and do that, I mean, hopefully they don't, but if they do, okay, you can't do anything about it. But when that same person is a leader who influences other people, well, now that's a different story, because that person can now victimize other people. You want to give in to whatever your thing is, well, okay, that's up to you. But you don't get to give into it and then try to pull other people into it with you. That's where you have to stand up and try to defend innocent people, and again, tell the truth.
Do you think there's some sort of a homosexual cult amongst clergy, amongst many of the clergy, in the sense that, I don't know if you heard, you probably heard about the hypothesis that pedophilia is a tool of transmitting homosexuality from the priests to young Catholics or young Christians. Do you think there's anything true about it, or is this just a crazy conspiracy theory?
No, I mean, I don't know if you could say that they go around and consciously try to take a 14-year-old boy and make him into a homosexual, but I don't know if they intend to do that or not. But a male victim of homosexual abuse, when he is young, immediately starts to have problems about his own sexuality. Before the event happened, he was interested in girls. Or at least neutral, depending on his age. After it happens, now he's got all kinds of questions, like, why did this happen to me? Am I really this way? Is that why he came after me and not that guy? I mean, all those questions start, flying through your mind. And a young person isn't equipped intellectually yet. The male's brain isn't even really kind of fully formed until roughly 25. So they have no real life experience. It's still all about them. At that young age, teenagers are still largely self-centered. Some of them grow up and become Democrats, and so they still see the world through the prism of their own experience. So if they're looking at they don't have the ability yet to look outside of themselves and say, this didn't have to do with me, it has to do with him. They return to a base of, why did this happen to me? Am I gay and I don't know it? He knew it, so he came after me. Was there a part of me that actually liked this? All of these massively destabilizing, psychologically destabilizing thoughts come into your head. And all of a sudden, it's very simple for you to begin to identify at some level, there's something not right about me. And you start possibly moving down that path. And then when you move down that path, you're not being raped or anything, but you start to move down that path. Now you confirm the wrong notion in your own head, and now you're convinced you are. So, yeah, the human psyche is an enormously complex, complex set of thoughts and propositions, and feelings, and experiences. It's like a big giant stew on a pot, a stove. And you have no idea. You throw in a little this and a little that. You don't really know what it's going to taste like until it's all done. And it's massively unfair. It's massively unfair to simply treat and accept somebody who somewhere along the line was a victim, whether physical abuse, emotional, psychological, whatever. They were somehow abused, to then treat them in such a way that you define them by that experience, or those experiences of abuse that they have now ratified in their own head because they don't want to face the truth of the horrible situation. And that's very understandable. They don't want to go back to that. So they're like, nope, not going back there. This is who I am. Yay, yay. They put on a whatever, rainbow bikini and run up and down the streets in New York or something. Because they just don't want to go back and face the pain. They'd rather embrace the psychological damage than go back and go through the pain of trying to fix it. Those kinds of men cannot be priests. They cannot be bishops. If something happens to them in their youth, fine. Got it. It's a horrible thing. Don't have to execute them or anything, but they cannot be ordained. And what happened in the church over these last 50 years or so is a good number of those types of men got in, and then started gathering all sorts of other men like that in and ordaining them and making them bishops and the whole bit. And the scales tipped so that you now have this enormous number of homosexual men who are priests or bishops or both, who drive out good men, heterosexual men, who might have their own sets of problems, but not this. Sure. You drive them out of you either don't let them into seminary, or if they come into seminary, you get rid of them as soon as you figure out they're not going to go along with this. And if the occasional one does slip through the cracks, well, then they isolate him, freeze him, persecute him, and try to drive him out of the priesthood. And that's what goes on. And it's horrible. It's horrible. And the only way to turn this around is to be truthful about the situation and just say what it is. We've been doing that here for 10 years. So, and they hate us.
God bless you for that. I wanted to ask you this.
This has to be the last question. I got to get back to the other reports.
The problem of homosexuality and pedophilia amongst clergy, Democratic Party, Republican Party, mainstream politics. Are there any relations, correlations, maybe even causations? Are the mainstream, the majority of American Catholic clergy Democrats because of these problems? Could it be? Do you have any hypotheses?
Sure. They all agree with the same. They have the same worldview. Liberal clergy and liberal politicians, meaning I should say Marxist minded. Yeah. They've been influenced by the Marxist narrative. Maybe some of them without even necessarily recognizing that, but they've been awash, drowned in the Marxist narrative, and they are willing to, and that's their worldview. So they share that worldview with other like-minded people. Some of them might be bishops, some of them might be politicians, some of them might be industry leaders, some of them might be in media, but they all have the same worldview. So they all advance each other's worldview because it's their worldview. And that worldview has no room for God. It has no room for the church. It has no room for any sort of sexual restraint at all. And it begins to rot a person's intellect. It destroys who they are. So, you know, you shouldn't think it's particularly strange to see so much violence in the world. Even all the protests and things here in the United States, you know, recently. You know, you've created a world, or a world has been created by this driving narrative that anything you want, you should be able to have. And if you have to get it through violence, well, then you get it through violence. Maybe that's not the first thing you do. For some people it is, but not for the average person. But if you have to go, you know, exercise a degree of violence to get it, well, then you do. You know, most, I'd venture to say that most men, for example, who are homosexual probably arrived there because of some act of violence. They internalize that, they grow up with it, it twists their view of the world, and they go and act out on that. Angry. I mean, one of the things you'll find about you know, homosexual men, you can even see it in a lot of the clergy reactions to things, is the rage or the anger that they display. They take it out on somebody else or a cause or Donald Trump or whoever. They'll take it out on something, but it's really, they can't deal with it inside themselves, so they have to, you know, drop it on somebody else or something else. And you know, many gay guys are angry as hell at God. They feel like they have been, you know, a great injustice has been done to them, which it was. I mean, that's absolutely true. When they were younger, it was. But because the culture won't allow this conversation, there's no way for them to kind of get their lives back in order. So they just go on a tear. And, you know, if you look at the whole Black Lives Matter movement, it's a movement that quietly, but nonetheless still quietly, maybe doesn't directly promote violence, you know, murder and mayhem, but it admits that there are times when it's necessary. So that's kind of promoting it. The entire Black Lives movement was born out of the gay culture. So there's an absolute connection. Oh yeah, the whole thing, the three women who started it are three black lesbians. And they are, you know, so, you know, when you look, again, that's why you got to understand all kind of the psychological stuff that's just underneath. Don't believe what people say, believe what they do. And that's what the, you know, and the fact that the U.S. bishops are so many, not all of them, but some bishops are, so too many of them, are embracing of this because they're cowardly men who are themselves gay. You know, cowardly men who put their arms around all of this, and they want to feel relevant, and they want to be liked and accepted, and you know, they're not real men, and not because they're gay. They're not real men because they haven't faced the music about being gay. There's a problem there, and they want to run away from it. When you have a problem, you got to, however painful or whatever it is, you got to stare it in the face and you know, maybe you can't fix it, but you can at least address it and, you know, put your house in order, and they don't want to. So, and they're angry about that because they know their house should be in order, and they're just too scared to do it. Well, when the rest of us don't have to live with that. We don't have to live with that. We get to stand up and say, no, you're wrong. And if they kill you, and you go to heaven. Okay, so you're trying to get to heaven anyway. That's just a quicker way to get there.
Michael Voris, Church Militant, thank you for your time. Thank you for your substance, for your work. God bless you for your work. For your audience, maybe someone wants subscribe to my channel. For my audience, follow Church Militant, Michael Voris, Vortex. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Aleš. Very, very nice talking with you. Thank you.
Have a nice day, and thank you.
God bless all your viewers. Bye-bye.
Bye.